Hi, it's me again. I mentioned I had an ECG in the last video and I couldn't remember having it. Probably a good reason for that, and probably because I didn't have one. It was probably what they call an EEG, and I'm not even going to actually pronounce what that stands for, but it basically measures your brain waves. So I would have had electrodes around my scalp area. So again, I can't remember that very well, but I don't think it was an ECG, I think it was an EEG. So if you want to read up about that, go ahead, yeah, because I can't remember a great deal. So I had a mountain of blood taken as well. They took a lot of blood, ruling out different things, but it was a lot. So if you are going to have all these tests done, prepare to feel like a pincushion, because that's exactly how you'll feel. The other test that they did was called a VER test. Now that's about measuring the activity that's going on from your brain to your eyes and how your eyes are responding to stimulus around you. So I do remember this one because they had to wheel me down in a wheelchair, which yeah, it was across the building, so it was a bit of a walk, and yeah, so turned up in a wheelchair. And they put a lot of sticky kind of electrodes on my head, and I can remember having great difficulty getting them off my hair and that in the shower when I had one afterwards. But so they put them on, and then I sat in front of two computer screens, both with black and white checkerboards on them, and I had to cover one eye, or they did, maybe sticky taped it over, and I had to watch a red dot on the checkerboard and had to keep my eyes focused on that red dot, which was really, really difficult in one of my eyes. And that's pretty scary when you are trying so hard to be normal and you want that test to come out normal, and then you know that your eye is struggling to stay focused on that one red dot. That was pretty confronting. So I knew one eye was okay, I knew one eye didn't perform as good as the other one, so that was tough. Because you've still got this hope that, you know, maybe they've got it wrong, and that, you know, you're going to pass all the tests and they're going to go, well, we don't know what's wrong with you, which in a sense, I think my thinking was that would be better than getting a diagnosis of MS, as long as they just didn't know what it was and they can keep testing me. But I knew I hadn't done so well in that VER test. So the other thing that they did, and I think it was maybe the second morning or the third morning that I was there, was called the lumbar puncture. So a spinal tap, for those of you who know it as a spinal tap. That was probably the hardest thing I did when I was in there. That was very scary. I was not looking forward to it. I knew a little bit about it. I knew that they were going to put a fairly thick needle into the base of my spine, my lower spine, to try and extract some spinal fluid. There are proteins in that spinal fluid that they can use, like measure levels, and that can be an indicator for MS. So it's a pretty, you know, good diagnostic tool, the lumbar puncture, in combination with the MRI, and then everything else is about ruling things out. I think the VER is pretty important as well, but it's really the lumbar puncture and the MRI combined together. The only downside about the lumbar puncture is that you don't get the results straight away, and by the time I'd left hospital, I couldn't be diagnosed because those results still hadn't come back. So it wasn't until I saw the neurologist in February that I actually went back and got all my test results together. So the lumbar puncture was performed by a student doctor, which wasn't ideal for me. They had a bit of it was overseen by the professor. He was kind of training up the new doctor, and I guess somebody's got to be the guinea pig for that. So yeah, they had a bit of trouble finding the right spot at the beginning, so that was kind of excruciating. But then you know, they drained fluid for probably, seemed like about 10 minutes. It may not have been that long. And then afterwards it was all bandaged up quite heavily. You know, they've got to be very careful about sterilising themselves. They got very geared up to perform it, and they were doing that, putting all their stuff on in front of me, and that was a bit scary to see. But the actual procedure, I didn't see it at all because I was lying on the side of the bed with my knees curled up in front of me. Yeah, so they could access the area. It's the best way they can, I suppose. They did tell me they may come out with a pretty bad headache over the next day or so, which didn't happen, so it doesn't happen to everybody, which is good for you guys to know if you haven't had one. You may not get a headache, but you may. The other thing is that they said I may have a sore back, and that I did have. I had to lie on my back for a good hour afterwards because they don't like you jumping out of bed and walking around when, you know, they want to make sure that you're not having any leakage with your spinal fluid and that. So I stayed still for quite some time, and then I did get up and walk around, and I felt it. I don't know what a pinched nerve feels like, but it felt a bit twingy down there. And that kind of went on for probably maybe 2 or 3 weeks after that. So it does go away after a while. I just was a little bit surprised how long that kind of dragged out for me. But again, I was okay. I was fine, and it did go away. It didn't hamper my walking, but I was just aware that it was there. So I've got notes here to help me along because again, my memory of it is not sharp at all. And I don't think that's a cognitive thing for me. My memory's pretty good. I think I've actually just blocked it out, to be honest. And I guess so many things have happened since then that, yeah, I cannot remember any great detail of. I remember having a lot of family and friends come in and visit me, a lot of text messages. I didn't want visitors to start with. I just wanted it to come and go really quietly, and I almost wanted to pretend it wasn't happening, and I didn't want people to know. But family are your family, and of course they're going to come in regardless, and good friends will do the same. And I was really glad in the end that they did. I needed them. I didn't know that I did, but I did need them. It's not something that you can go through alone, and I think if you do, then you're stronger than me. So I had all sorts of workers come in to see me. Social worker, that was probably the hardest thing, and I think telling her my story made her cry as well, and that was really difficult because you don't expect the actual professional to be crying. You expect to do all the crying, but I made her cry out of sympathy, I suppose. I remember her handing me an MS pack, and I almost threw it right back at her. I was very depressed. I couldn't stop crying the whole time. They were really worried about me, but I didn't want to be treated like an MS patient, but that's exactly how I was treated, even though I hadn't been diagnosed. So that was really tough. So I had a dietitian come in and try and get me eating properly, and, you know, hospital strength sustagen and things like that, because I dropped to 48 kilos, and that was really unusual for me to drop that amount of weight when I'm normally around 63 kilos. Obviously you can see I've gained it all back, which I think is from maybe, I don't know, eating too much of course, but also quitting the smokes and that. I have gained a bit, but you guys can watch me lose it again. So you be my inspiration, support me to do it, because I'm not happy the way I am. Yeah, so I don't want to not have this download, but I'll keep going just for another minute. So I had a physio come in, a couple of them, and they gave me different tests that I could do, exercises to improve my strength in my legs and my balance, and that was kind of the main kind of thing that was going on for me, the leg strength and balancing. And yeah, so I got some exercises to practice in hospital and to do when I got home. I had an OT come in, an occupational therapist, and asked me about work situation, what I think I might need. I'm like, I don't know. I'll get your card and I might give you a call. But at that point, I haven't been to work. I didn't know how I was going to be or anything. So it was good to meet them anyway. So I ended up walking out with a lot of business cards. I had a neuropsychologist come in, the head of the psychology team there. She spent quite a bit of time with me, visited me a few times, got me on some antidepressants, which I swiftly took myself off not that long after. I wouldn't recommend doing that. I just knew that they weren't for me and that I didn't want to be on them. But of course I followed her lead, and then when I got home I made a decision to take myself off them, which I wouldn't recommend to anybody. I'm not telling people to do that, but it wasn't right for me, so I took myself off them. So I had lots of people come in to see me, and it all seemed to be on the one day. So there was one of the days where I'd had too much and I really broke down, and enough was enough. Between phone calls, doctors coming in and out, and then social workers, physios, OTs, psychologists, psychiatrists, it was getting a bit much. So just to have a look at my notes again. I think I talked about all the interesting people I met while I was in there, and the loneliness that you feel, even though you're surrounded by people. It's not a great environment to be in. I won't lie about that. Some of the difficult things, I guess, were even like little things like showering and trying to do those basic things, you know, with the steroids. I know that they were working to get the inflammation down, but they can only do so much, and it can start a process of you healing quicker. But, you know, I expected within 3 days to be back on my feet and completely normal, and that I wasn't. So I was getting better, but I still had a fair way to go. I don't know, I'm probably missing things out, and I'm sure in future videos I will remember, and I will interject and say, oh, I forgot to mention. If you've got any questions, please write to me and ask me, and I'm very open about this stuff. I'm happy to answer anything. But it was 6 days of hell. I'd definitely say, apart from Dad passing, it was the worst time in my whole entire life. You're in the wilderness, and, you know, even though you're clinging on to a little bit of hope that they may be wrong and that it may be something else, at the same time they're treating you like an MS patient, and that's very hard to take when you know you haven't had a diagnosis yet, and that you'll be walking out there without one because you won't have your test results. So I think that's probably all I can think of at the moment to tell you about that. But it's a barrage of tests, it's not easy, and yeah, reach out to people, because you can do it alone, but why would you want to? And I thought I could do it alone, but I couldn't. So yeah, anyway, my next video will be about February the 8th. I didn't have any contact with any professionals until that time. The steroids, one good thing about them is that they have a bit of a protective factor, so I knew and hoped that I would be okay from mid-January when I was in hospital having the test to February the 8th when I'd go and get my results and speak to the neuro and find out once and for all what is going on with me. So thank goodness I didn't have another relapse, and I went back on February the 8th, and I'll let you know next video what they had to say. Thanks, bye.